Hi everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. Today I have an incredible and delicious cake recipe for you guys that I know you're going to love for any occasion. I'm going to show you how to make my raspberry pistachio Swiss roll cake with whipped cream frosting. This cake is so quick and easy to put together. It is impressive and it is so delicious. We'll start with a simple sponge cake batter, fold in some crushed pistachios, and while this cake is baking, I'm going to show you how to make a simple whipped cream frosting. We'll assemble the cake with some crushed raspberries on the inside, add more raspberries and more pistachios on the top. You guys are going to love this cake for any occasion and any time of the year. For the full list of ingredients, including the ingredients with metric measurements, make sure to head on down into that video description box and follow the link over to my website. I'm going to have everything online there for you guys. Meanwhile, let's get started on this cake. I'm preheating my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and I'm going to get things started with the pistachios. So I have about 1.25 cups of roasted unsalted pistachios. You can actually use salted ones too for this recipe. These are just the only ones I could find in the store, and actually the salted ones are going to complement the flavors of the cake so well. I'm going to be using a food processor today, but you could always just use a knife to chop these up. And then I'll pulse the pistachios until they're finely crushed. We'll empty these out into a mixing bowl. I'm going to measure out 1 cup of the crushed pistachios for my cake batter, and the rest I'm going to use for filling and garnishing the cake. I've set aside my crushed pistachios for now and we can get started on the sponge cake. So I have 6 large eggs. I've brought these up to room temperature. They will whisk better than the cold ones straight out of the refrigerator. I'm going to pour them into my mixer bowl. I'll add in 1 cup of white granulated sugar and 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I'm going to turn my mixer on and let it run anywhere from 7 to 9 minutes until those eggs are really light, fluffy, and voluminous, and they should be like a pale white, creamy color. For the dry ingredients, I'll need 1 cup of all-purpose flour. I'll add in a teaspoon of baking powder. Just give that a quick mix. And now we can start sifting in our flour. So I usually add the flour in 3 parts, and you want to mix it in gradually so that way you don't have any clumps of flour. Sift, sift, sift. And then grab a spatula and you want to fold gently but thoroughly from the bottom of the mixing bowl. You want to make sure that all that flour gets incorporated before you add the next batch. Next, we're going to add in our crushed or ground pistachios. Just kind of lightly sprinkle them over the eggs and then fold those in extra gently but thoroughly. For today's recipe, I'm going to be using a 13 by 18 inch sheet pan. I've sprayed down the sides with the baking spray before laying down a sheet of parchment paper. I'll add in the sponge cake batter. And then you'll want to spread it gently and evenly to the edges. My pistachio sponge cake is ready for the oven. It's going to bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 18 to 20 minutes. It should be a light golden brown color on the top and it should be completely set, so when you touch it on the surface, it'll just kind of spring right back. Once this is done baking, you'll want to immediately roll it, and I'm going to show you how to do that next. And as soon as I take the cake out of the oven, I'm just going to run a knife along the edges to make sure the cake isn't stuck anywhere. And I'm going to sprinkle a very light dusting of powdered sugar over the top. This will help prevent the cake from sticking to our tea towel. Grab a clean little towel, place it over the top of the cake. Place a cooling rack over the top and then invert the cake. We'll remove the parchment paper off of the cake. I'm going to put it back down. This will keep the cake from sticking back on itself. And then we're going to start at one end and we're going to roll the cake back up. And you want to do this as soon as you take the cake out of the oven. If you let it cool down for even just a little bit, it's going to be extremely hard to roll it and it's going to crack. And now we just let this cool down. I've set aside my sponge cake to cool down completely. Meanwhile, I'm going to show you how to make that whipped cream frosting. So we're going to start with 16 ounces, 2 packages of cream cheese. I've softened this at room temperature for maybe 20 minutes. You don't want it to be too soft. And we're going to drop this into a mixing bowl. And I have my flat beater attached first. We'll switch to a whisk a little bit later. And I'm just going to beat the cream cheese for about 4 to 5 minutes until it's really nice and smooth. I'm going to scrape down the sides of that mixing bowl pretty often. Make sure it's all incorporated. Once my cream cheese is well beaten, I'm going to switch things over to my whisk. And now we can add in our heavy cream. So I have 3 cups of very chilled heavy cream. And the colder it is, the better it's going to whisk. Pour that in. I'll add in 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And we'll need 1.5 to 2 cups of confectioner's sugar. Drop that in. If you want your frosting to be sweeter, you can just add more. I'm going to turn on my mixer to a low speed, mix it for about a minute, then I'll stop, scrape down the sides of the mixing bowl, and then keep whisking it on a medium-high speed until stiff peaks form. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes on this mixer, might take up to 5 minutes at home. Next up for my filling, I've measured out 2 cups of fresh raspberries. You can also use frozen ones, just thaw them out beforehand. I'm going to sprinkle in 1/4 cup of white granulated sugar. I'm going to grab a fork and mash the raspberries down into like a puree. All right, time to put together this pistachio Swiss roll cake. My cake has cooled completely. You want it to be completely cool, otherwise it will melt the frosting. This I just took out of the refrigerator. You want to keep the frosting well chilled until you're ready to use it so it doesn't melt. And I have my crushed raspberries ready to go and my leftover pistachios. So the first thing we have to do is unroll the cake. And you want to do this gently so that the sponge cake doesn't tear. Just start at one end and gently unfold it. And the first thing we'll need to do is grab the crushed raspberries and we're going to spread them evenly onto the cake. Next up, I'm going to add a generous amount of my whipped cream frosting. It's important that you don't overfill the cake, otherwise that can also cause the cake to crack. So add a generous but not overfilling amount. I'm going to grab an offset spatula, spread that evenly to the edges. I'm going to sprinkle some of those crushed pistachios over the top. I'm going to save just a little bit for garnishing the top as well. And then I'm going to roll my cake back up the same way I initially rolled it. You don't want to roll it the other way, which can cause it to break. And then use the towel underneath to kind of fold the cake over. And now that I have my cake rolled, I'm going to grab the rest of my frosting and frost the outside of the cake as well. Apply a nice generous layer. And once I have my cake frosted on the outside, I'm going to transfer the rest of my frosting into a pastry bag. And today I am using a Teco tip number 847. Now, if you guys would like for me to leave affiliate links for the cake decorating tips that I use in my videos, leave me a comment down below and I will start including those because I know some of you guys have been asking for the links. I'm going to add a light dusting of the pistachios over the top. All right, let's cut into this cake and take a peek on the inside. You'll want to let this sit in the refrigerator for at least an hour to let that frosting set up a little bit. And check out the inside of this cake. I am loving all those layers of the raspberry, the whipped cream. This looks so incredible. How stunning is this pistachio raspberry cake? I love the color combination, that pistachio green with the bright red raspberries, and then having that whipped cream on top and more berries just makes it extra special. For the full list of ingredients and the written instructions, including the metric measurements, don't forget to head on down into that video description box and follow the link over to my website. I'm gonna have everything online for you guys. Meanwhile, let's dig in and enjoy. I absolutely love a good Swiss roll cake, and this frosting is so light and fluffy too. That bite right there, phenomenal. This cake is so incredibly delicious. I love the nuttiness of the pistachio in the sponge cake, and then having a little bit in the filling as well just adds even more flavor. And then you have a little bit of that tartness and fruitness coming in from the raspberries. This cake is just beyond words. So incredibly delicious. And if you want even more raspberry flavor, just drop a handful of fresh berries right on top of each cake slice and you're all good to go. You guys are going to be head over heels in love with the flavor combination. You get the nutty pistachios, those sweet raspberries, the fluffy whipped cream. I just cannot ask for a better flavor combination. Now this is one of those cakes that I do recommend refrigerating overnight, just to allow those crushed raspberries and the whipped cream to soften up and moisten the sponge cake a little bit more, because sponge cakes do tend to be a little bit on the dry side. Guys, thank you so much for watching my latest episode. I hope you enjoyed this incredible cake for your next special occasion, and I'll see you next time with a new recipe.